I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd sit down and write something like this. But I've been carrying these stories around for years, and they don't exactly fade with time. They settle in, like sediment. Heavier. Harder to ignore. So here it is. One of them. This happened about 8 years ago, when I was working as a consultant for a mid-sized infrastructure firm. That's the polite way to put it. In reality, I was the guy who knew how to move things along when bureaucracy got in the way. Permits, approvals, tenders, you name it. If something needed a push, I was usually somewhere in the background applying pressure. The job that pulled me in deeper than I ever expected started with a government procurement contract. Roads, public transport upgrades, the usual. Millions allocated for development. Kind of deal. Except most of that money never really made it to development. The phrase they used, the one that stuck with me, was advanced distribution. Clean, almost harmless sounding. Like we were just organizing funds ahead of time. What it actually meant was this: millions were being quietly redirected before a single brick was laid. I didn't come up with the scheme. I wasn't that important. But I understood it fast, and more importantly, I understood my role in it. At the time, I told myself it wasn't really a crime. Not in the way people think of crime. No violence, no victims you could point to. Just numbers shifting between accounts, contracts awarded to preferred bidders, and a few signatures in the right places. But that's how it always starts, right? You shrink it down in your head until it feels manageable. Looking back, I think the real reason I got involved wasn't money, though there was plenty of that. It was access. Being in rooms I wasn't supposed to be in. Hearing conversations that weren't meant for people like me. Feeling like I'd cracked some hidden layer of the world. And once you see that layer, it's hard to pretend it doesn't exist. That's when they brought me the proposal. Not a question. Not really a choice either. Just a folder, a number, and a simple instruction. Make sure this goes through. Smoothly. I should have walked away right there. I didn't. The folder they handed me didn't look like much, thin, gray, almost forgettable. But inside was everything: projected budgets, subcontractor lists, timelines that were clearly fictional, and a set of recommended partners, highlighted in yellow like it was some kind of suggestion. It wasn't. I remember sitting in my car after that meeting, engine off, just flipping through the pages again and again. The numbers didn't add up, and that was the point. Millions marked as preliminary mobilization costs, scheduled to be released before any actual work began. Money out first, accountability later. Or never. My role was simple on paper: make sure the right people signed off at the right time. In reality, it meant mapping out who needed convincing, who needed incentives, and who needed to be kept in the dark. I started with a list of names. Mid-level officials, procurement officers, one deputy who liked to pretend he was incorruptible. I knew better. Everyone had a price. It just wasn't always money. That was the moment it became real for me. Not abstract. Not just paperwork. A system. And I was about to help it run. Planning something like this isn't about one big move. It's about 100 small ones that don't look suspicious on their own. That's what I focused on first. If anyone ever looked back, I wanted the trail to feel ordinary. I started scheduling meetings that had nothing to do with the contract on paper. Coffee chats, industry updates, casual check-ins. I'd bring up unrelated projects first, let people relax, then slowly steer the conversation. You'd be surprised how easily people open up when they think they're in control. The deputy was the tricky one. He had a reputation to protect, which made him more predictable, not less. I didn't offer him money. Instead, I made sure a competing proposal, one that would have embarrassed his department, quietly disappeared. Suddenly, approving our contract looked like the safest option. For others, it was simpler. Favors, future opportunities, quiet assurances that saying, yes, now would pay off later. By the end of the week, nothing official had changed. But everything was already in motion. Once the conversations were in place, the real work started, the part no one ever writes down. It wasn't about convincing anymore. It was about reinforcing decisions before doubt could creep in. I coordinated with 2 internal contacts from our firm. Officially, they handled compliance and documentation. Unofficially, they knew exactly how to make questionable things look routine. We adjusted timelines so the advance payments seemed urgent, tight deadlines, seasonal constraints, risk of losing funding. All manufactured, all believable. At the same time, I made sure each person involved felt isolated in their decision. No one knew the full picture except me and a couple of people higher up. That was intentional. If anyone hesitated, they'd assume everyone else had already agreed. There was one moment I remember clearly, a procurement officer pausing mid-meeting, asking if the advance percentage was a bit high. My heart kicked, just for a second. I smiled, slid a revised projection across the table, and said, "Only on paper." He nodded. And just like that, the machine kept moving. The first transfer was the point of no return. Up until then, everything could still be explained away as planning, discussions, hypotheticals. But once money moved, it became something else entirely. I wasn't in the room when the authorization was signed, but I knew the exact minute it happened. My phone buzzed, just a single message from one of the senior guys. Done. I checked the internal system a few minutes later. There it was. A multi-million advance labeled as Initial Mobilization. Clean. Approved. Released. What struck me wasn't the size of the amount, it was how normal it looked. No alarms, no red flags, no dramatic moment. Just another transaction in a long list of transactions. That's when the adrenaline hit. Not panic, something sharper. A kind of quiet rush. Like standing too close to the edge of something and realizing you're not stepping back. I told myself it was controlled. Planned. That everyone involved knew what they were doing. But deep down, I also knew this was the moment everything could unravel. And we just crossed it. People imagine money like that just disappears into offshore accounts overnight. It doesn't. That would be sloppy. What we did was slower, layered, and, on the surface, completely legitimate. The funds moved through a chain of subcontractors. Real companies, real invoices, real-looking work orders. Some of them even did a fraction of the work just to keep appearances intact. But most of the services were inflated, duplicated, or entirely fictional. I was responsible for keeping that chain intact. Making sure each transfer had a reason attached to it, even if the reason was meaningless. Site preparation. Logistical support. Preliminary assessments. Words that sounded official enough to avoid questions. There was one subcontractor who got nervous. Called me late one night, voice tight, asking if everything checked out. Said the numbers felt off. I didn't threaten him. Didn't need to. I just reminded him how many contracts he'd lose if this one suddenly collapsed. Silence on the line. Then, understood. That was the moment I realized something uncomfortable. Control wasn't just part of the job anymore. It was the job. Up until that point, everything had been almost too smooth. Which, in hindsight, should have been the warning sign. Systems like this don't run perfectly, they just look like they do until something small goes wrong. In our case, it was an audit flag. Not a full investigation, just a routine internal check that happened to land on one of the subcontractor invoices. Wrong timing, wrong file. I found out through one of my contacts, who forwarded me a message with a single line. Can you clarify this discrepancy? The word discrepancy stuck with me. It sounded harmless, almost polite. But I knew what it meant. Someone, somewhere, had noticed something didn't align. I pulled the documents immediately, went through them line by line. The issue was minor. A duplicated service entry, slightly different wording, same amount. Sloppy. Avoidable. But the real problem wasn't the mistake, it was attention. Once someone starts looking, they tend to keep looking. That night, for the first time since this started, I didn't feel in control. I felt exposed. The next morning, I treated it like a fire that needed containing before anyone smelled smoke. No panic, no sudden moves. That's what gets people caught. Instead, I went back to the basics: paperwork, timing, and confidence. I reached out to the procurement officer tied to that invoice. Kept the tone casual, like it was a routine clarification. He sounded nervous, which didn't help. Kept repeating that he just signed what was in front of him. That told me two things: he hadn't noticed the issue before, and he was already worried about being blamed. Good. Fear makes people cooperative. We adjusted the documentation. Not by deleting anything that leaves gaps, but by adding context. Revised descriptions, supplemental reports, a corrected version that made the duplication look like a phased service. Boring, technical, easy to overlook. Then came the hardest part: sending it back. I attached the files, wrote a short explanation, and hit send before I could second guess it. After that, all I could do was wait. And waiting, I learned, is where the real pressure lives. It took 3 days to get a response. 3 long, stretched out days where every notification on my phone felt like it could be the one that ended everything. When the reply finally came, it was short. Too short. Clarification accepted. No further action required. That was it. No follow-up questions, no escalation, no request for additional documents. On paper, it meant we were safe. The issue had been resolved, filed away, forgotten. But I didn't feel relief. If anything, it unsettled me more. Because it confirmed something I hadn't fully admitted to myself yet. The system didn't just allow this kind of thing, it absorbed it. Smoothed it out. Made it disappear without friction. I told the others it was handled. They moved on immediately, like it had never been a risk to begin with. Deadlines, new transfers, the next phase already lining up. But something had shifted for me. Before, I thought we were carefully navigating around the edges of the rules. Now it felt like there were no edges. Just a wide, open space where almost anything could pass, if you dressed it up right. After the audit scare faded, something changed in the way I worked, and I'm not proud of it. The hesitation I had at the beginning? Gone. Replaced by this quiet confidence that we could handle anything that came our way. That's how it pulls you in. We expanded the structure. More subcontractors, more layers, more distance between the original funds and where they eventually landed. It wasn't even about necessity anymore. It was about comfort. Redundancy. If one link broke, the rest would hold. I started anticipating problems before they happened. Adjusting numbers preemptively, inserting buffer expenses to absorb discrepancies, coaching people on what to say if questions came up. It became almost mechanical. There was even a moment, this is the part that bothers me the most, when I caught myself enjoying it. Not the money. The control. The precision. The feeling of building something complex and watching it work exactly as intended. That's when you stop seeing it as a risk. And start seeing it as a system you own. Which, looking back, was exactly when I should have gotten out. Systems don't fail on their own, people do. I knew that from the beginning, but I underestimated how quickly pressure can crack someone who isn't used to carrying it. It started with one of the newer guys in the subcontractor chain. Not even a major player, just someone handling documentation and internal approvals. The kind of role you don't think twice about. He requested a meeting. In person. That alone was unusual. Most people preferred distance, calls, emails, anything that left less of a footprint. But he insisted. When we sat down, he didn't waste time. Said the numbers he was processing didn't match the actual scope of work. Said he'd started keeping copies. Just in case. That phrase hit harder than I expected. I kept my tone calm, told him discrepancies were normal in early project phases, that everything would align later. Standard explanation. He nodded, but I could see it, he didn't buy it. As I left that meeting, one thought kept looping in my head. It only takes one person to stop playing along. And he was very close. I didn't have the luxury of ignoring him. People like that, uncertain, but not yet committed, are the most dangerous. They haven't decided whether to stay quiet or speak up. So I acted quickly. I arranged a second meeting, this time less formal. No office, no records. Just a quiet place where the conversation could stay between us. I didn't go in with threats. That would have pushed him in the wrong direction. Instead, I reframed everything. I walked him through the bigger picture. Budget flexibility, phased reporting, how large projects always look messy at the start. I even showed him selectively edited documents, versions that aligned just enough to feel real. Then I shifted the focus to him. Talked about his position, his future in the company, how being difficult at the wrong time could stall a career before it even started. Not a threat. Just a possibility. He didn't agree. Not outright. But he stopped pushing. And in this line of work, silence is as good as consent. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just delayed something, not prevented it. It happened late. I remember the time because I'd already convinced myself the worst was behind us, just past midnight, phone lighting up in a dark room. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Almost. The voice on the other end was calm, controlled. Too controlled. He introduced himself as part of an external oversight body. Didn't name it directly, but I knew the type. Not internal. Not routine. That alone was enough to drop the temperature in the room. He didn't accuse me of anything. Didn't even mention the contract right away. Just asked general questions about procurement processes, subcontractor selection, standard procedures. The kind of questions that sound harmless until you realize how precisely they're framed. He already knew something. I kept my answers clean, textbook. Neutral. Gave him nothing he could use directly. At least, that's what I told myself. Before ending the call, he said one thing that stuck. We may follow up. No urgency. No pressure. Which somehow made it worse. Because it meant this wasn't random. It was deliberate. After that call, everything felt different, even though, on the surface, nothing had changed. The project kept moving, payments kept clearing, meetings stayed on schedule. But for me, it was like watching the same scene with the sound slightly off. I started noticing things I'd ignored before. People repeating questions. Emails worded more carefully than usual. That same subcontractor, the nervous one, avoiding eye contact when we crossed paths. Paranoia? Maybe. But paranoia doesn't come out of nowhere. I tightened everything. Reviewed documents twice, sometimes 3 times. Limited conversations. Stopped putting anything unnecessary in writing. If there was even a small inconsistency, I corrected it immediately. But here's the problem. Once you start reacting like that, you're not managing the system anymore. You're responding to it. And that means you've lost control. The others didn't seem to notice. Or didn't care. To them, it was still business as usual. To me, it felt like standing in a room where the walls were slowly closing in, just enough that no one else could see it yet. But I could doubt. I wish I could say there was a dramatic ending, raids, arrests, some clean moment where everything finally caught up. That's not how it played out. The investigation never landed directly on me. It spread sideways, focused on irregularities, mismanagement, a few convenient scapegoats higher up who took the fall publicly. The project was quietly restructured, contracts reassigned, headlines came and went. On paper, I walked away untouched. But that's not the same as getting away with it. I left the firm a few months later. Told people I wanted a change, something quieter. That part was true. What I didn't say was that I couldn't sit in those meetings anymore without hearing that voice on the phone, or seeing the look on that guy's face when he said he was keeping copies. You don't forget those things. What I learned? It's never just numbers. There are always consequences, you just don't always get to see them. If you ever find yourself thinking you can manage something like this, Don't. Because even if nothing happens to you, something will still stay with you.